perfect man, I'm trying to do the best that I can with what it is I have. I ain't no perfect man, I'm trying to do the best that I can with what it is I have. Put my heart and soul into this song. Yes, yes. I hope you feel me.
All right, guys, welcome back to our next session of virtual professional development. And we're doing things a little bit different. Thank you so much to Mr. Drevniak and his team of producers for getting this together. And today we're going to be talking about student engagement. Now, student engagement is at the center of teaching and learning. Specifically, when you look at Danielson's framework for teaching, student engagement is what it's all about. So the title of our lesson today is Igniting Student Engagement, Reclaiming the Joy of Learning. And we're looking at a multifaceted approach to fostering active participation, intrinsic motivation, and a love of learning in the classroom. For yourself as a teacher, you might be feeling like, yeah, I'd like him to give me the secret magic pill and how we can fix this. And there's not one way to fix it. So I wanted to give you guys a couple of different strategies that might work in your classroom. The research question that we have here today is, what are the factors that contribute to student disengagement in the classroom, and what strategies can be employed to create learning environments that foster active participation, intrinsic motivation, and a love of learning? So some of the key terms that we think about here, and I highlighted it, is disengagement, active participation, and intrinsic motivation. So let's get into it. Some of our key terms: student engagement. Student engagement is active participation, investment, and enthusiasm in the learning process. It includes behavioral, emotional, and cognitive engagement. The key term here is active. A lot of us who teach, we grew up in a time where you didn't necessarily have to be active in the learning process. We was able to sit down for an extended amount of time, listen to a teacher lecture, and understand the context. Well, that time has changed. The attention span of most students is approximately, you guessed it, 8 seconds before they're distracted. Now, social media, technology, even as I sit in this room, some of our friends are engaged in their cell phones. It makes it very difficult for our students to engage. So they have to be a part of the learning process in order to process the information. Disengagement, a lack of motivation, withdrawal, passive participation in learning. Now, in the past, this would not be considered disengagement. You could passively learn, but we're living in different times. So we want to figure out what are some of the things that causes students to be disengaged in the classroom. Intrinsic motivation. This is the most powerful factor in all of learning. When you get a person to learn because they are internally satisfied and a desire to learn. Here it says motivation derived from internal satisfaction and enjoyment of the task itself. That is where we want to get all of our students. It's a very difficult task, but if we can get students to want to learn because they want to learn, it kind of changes things just a little bit. Extrinsic motivation. Now, again, this is a generational change for us. A lot of us learned, not necessarily because we wanted to, but because we were fearful of what would happen if we didn't. There were severe consequences if we misbehaved. Now, parenting has shifted, and a lot of us say things like we should do what we used to do in the past. Spankings, punishment, yelling at students, taking away devices, it doesn't necessarily work in today's environment in schools. So the intrinsic parts, here it says motivation driven by external rewards or punishments. It doesn't necessarily work for all students, especially at the high school level. So that's something to think about. Active learning. Instructional methods that involve students in the learning process. What I've noticed is that the teachers that are the most effective in terms of student engagement are the teachers who really turn the classroom over to the students. Even during this process, as we're recording this video, this is student-led. So the level of engagement changes because they have a buy-in and they have a responsibility to make sure that this lesson goes well. The problem statement that I've generated it's a couple of different problems. Many of our students experience disengagement in the classroom, leading to decreased academic achievement, diminished motivation, and a negative impact on their overall well-being. This is evidenced by observations of students appearing bored or apathetic, high rates of absenteeism or tardiness, and disruptive behaviors or passive resistance. What we're noticing is a nationwide epidemic where students are not engaged. Absenteeism is rising, especially during this political environment. Students are coming later than usual, and the disruptive behaviors are all correlated to one another. In a report from Smith, it says, according to a 2021 study published in the Journal of Educational Psychology, students who spend more time using digital devices during class exhibits, lower levels of attention, engagement, and academic performance. The question that I ask is, how many hours does the average student spend on their device? Approximately 7 to 8 hours. So as a teacher, you are competing with a student who's looking at 10-second videos for 8 hours a day, and then they have to come into your classroom for 45 minutes and pay attention to you. That's what we're competing against. According to a recent study by the National Center of Educational Statistics, nearly a quarter of high school students report feeling disengaged in the classroom, leading to academic struggles and behavioral issues. According to another report by Pew Research, in 2019, 95% of teenagers have access to a smartphone, and 45% say they are online almost constantly. So in terms of our engagement in the classroom with students, a big part of it is negatively impacted by their level of engagement with their devices. Then there's other factors, meaning what consequences are being used at home, what's the positive and negative reinforcement in terms of their grades. And those are factors we can't necessarily contribute to. But I know as an educator, you feel like, well, I can't control what happens outside of my classroom and in my classroom. And I totally agree. To guide our inquiry, we're looking at a couple of things. We want to understand the factors that contribute to student disengagement. We want to explore root causes and contextualize the factors that lead to a lack of student engagement. We want to identify effective strategies for fostering active student participation. Finally, we want to examine the role of teacher practices and student perspectives. By addressing these key aspects, the research aims to uncover practical solutions for reclaiming the joy of learning and empowering students to become active, enthusiastic participants in the educational journey. Now, this is my part that I absolutely love. There's so many theoretical frameworks that helps us to understand how to improve student engagement. And you can pick and choose which one works for you. The first one we're looking at is constructivism. Learners as active meaning makers. Now, what this means is that as human beings, we learn in groups. We learn through our social interactions. We understand things based on how we interact with one another. We learn from one another. Next, self-determination theory, autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Again, this is really important. How do we get our students to be self-determined? Not based on a punishment or reward from a parent or a teacher, but their own personal desire to be excellent in the classroom. Next, flow theory, balancing challenge and skill. Now, this is a challenge because we have students on different levels academically, and when we try to produce work that's challenging for some, it might be overwhelming for others. And it also might be not too challenging for others. And this is different. For example, in an AP course where students are really prepared with fundamental skills to take that course, you can provide challenging content for the entire class. It might be a little bit different in a general education course where there's different students in the classroom that we have to speak to. Next, social cognitive theory, learning through observation and modeling. A lot of our students are visual learners. Just speaking to them doesn't work. They don't understand the content when we're just talking. So modeling and having them being a part of that process really helps them to engage a little bit more in the learning. So for myself, I've been an admin for approximately 16 years. I do on average 100 observations. Well, when I was in the city, 100 observations a year. This year, it's going to be a little bit more because it's a bigger school. And these are some of the key findings that I notice when I go into classrooms. From classroom observations, it says, observing student behaviors and teacher practices in various classrooms, focusing on indicators of engagement and disengagement such as body language, participation levels, and the use of technology. For teachers that have a high level of student engagement, they're always using technology. They're using smartphones, videos, art, polls, surveys. Students are up, moving in the classroom. There's a high level of engagement in those classrooms. When I do an observation and it's one person lecturing for 40 minutes straight, the level of engagement drops immediately. Why do people do it? Well, some teachers overestimate their ability to engage teenagers. And teenagers also do a really good job of asking you questions to get and make you talk a little bit more just so they can get through the class. That's a trick that they all use. They make you feel as if they're interested in your content just because they want you to talk more so they can do less work. So be careful of it. Student interviews. Conducting semi-structured interviews with students to explore their perspectives on what factors contribute to their engagement and disengagement in the learning process. One of the findings that most students would tell you is true is that they feel like the class is boring. It's irrelevant content and it lacks any type of active learning opportunities. Now, the students who are successful, even though it's boring, they have the ability to focus even though they don't necessarily like the content. But most students do not have the ability to sit in the classroom for 40 minutes listening to somebody speak. Students have stated that it literally feels painful. It feels like someone's harming them while they are sitting in the classroom. This is what students say. I think some of the students here feel that way right now. Yes? No? All right, engagement is low because I'm talking too much. All right, next, teacher interviews. The lack of student interest, motivation, disruptive classroom behaviors, limited resources and support, pressure of standardized testing. I want to stop there a little bit. Teachers want to be creative. They want engaging classroom discussions, but a lot of teachers talk about the pressure of completing the scope and sequence of a curriculum and also the real consequences of not necessarily doing well on state exams. If students don't do well, teachers sometimes feel pressure. So their ability to be creative is limited, or there's some fear there around the creativity and having student-centered instruction. And another thing that's happening with a lot of teachers, and they talk about it, is that there's a difficulty with adapting to diverse learning styles and diverse learners. There is a shift in our student population, not just here in Uniondale, but throughout the United States. And teachers are now faced with teaching to general education students, ENL students who speak a different language, and special education students that are on a wide range of challenges that they face. And that one teacher now has to create engaging instruction for all of those students. That's a real challenge. That's difficult. Analysis of student work. Examining samples of student work, such as assignments, projects, and assessments to assess the level of engagement and understanding demonstrated by the students and to identify potential patterns. What we notice with a lot of the student work is that it is AI generated. They are no longer critically thinking about anything. They are dropping the assignment into an AI-generated response. They get the response out. They drop it again into an AI-detected system where they can take away any type of semblance of AI-generated text. And that's the assignment that they're giving you. These are the students that are considered doing really, really well. They get 90s in the class, and when it's time to sit for the standardized exam, they're failing. So it's becoming difficult to get students to actually think critically about anything because of AI. Now, I use it. It's a great tool, but I do think that it's becoming a really easy out for some of our students. You can make up 20 assignments in a day, in an hour, using AI. And that's become a challenge for a lot of our students as well. Some of the things that we've discovered in terms of the research, and here it says the percentage of students who reported these factors as contributing to their engagement. 82% of students say that autonomy and choice in learning improves their level of engagement. That's 82%. That means that when you give assignments out and when you're thinking about engaging students, give them at least 2 to 3 options to complete the assignment. You make sure that it's standard aligned and they have 3 options to complete. That would help improve student engagement. Next, relevance to their personal interests. That's kind of difficult sometimes when you are teaching science or math. It's easier in the humanities because it's text-based and you can play around with it, but 2 + 2 = 4. And solving for X is solving for X. And I don't know how engaging that can be. But we have to be creative about the content. Why are they solving for X? How is it relevant to their lives? Opportunities for collaboration. I've been pushing this for some time. In our classrooms, we really got to get students to be in groups. Being in groups helps the students to challenge one another. Sometimes teaching a friend who doesn't understand the content helps them, the person who's teaching it, to remember it a little bit more. Use students as teachers' assistants. What I would do is literally sit down some periods and have students teach the class. And it changed the level of engagement immediately. Immediate feedback from teachers. Sometimes, if you give an assignment and a student is really engaged, but you don't give feedback for 3 weeks, the student immediately says, this is not something I'm going to take seriously anymore. So there needs to be some type of feedback, some positive reinforcement. Feeling of competence and achievement. Students want to feel productive and they want to feel as if they're doing something good. You got to make sure that you give them some positive feedback and let them know that they've done well. What it means for us as a school is we have to continue to invest in professional development, comprehensive professional development, something like what we're doing here with the virtual PD. You can't have PD like this for 216 folks and think that it's going to be effective. So what we're doing is we're creating an online platform so people can pick and choose what topics in professional development they want to focus on. Student-centered instruction. I've been saying this for some time now. We got to shift away from teacher-centered lecturing. It's time. It's past due. And it's important that we focus more on students. And we have to look at our school policies and what we consider disruptive behavior in the classroom. Sometimes redefining what it means to be disruptive in a classroom would help us. And if they had more outlets to be engaged, we'd have less problems with disruptive behaviors. By thoughtfully addressing these implications, schools can cultivate learning environments that ignite a genuine passion for learning and empower students to become active, invested participants in their educational journey. So moving forward, we're going to start implementing active learning strategies, enhance student choice and voice, strengthen educator-student relationships, and conduct ongoing evaluation and refinement. So again, guys, thank you so much for joining me on this installment of our professional development. This is a new platform that we're doing, and we're really excited about what this is going to look like moving forward. Thank you so much. Have a good day.